Jonnie Milton Hutchinson, you're 80 years old, lived in Polk County all of your life except for time in the military service. Started practicing law several decades ago and still practicing law.
That's correct. Got out of law school on the 28th day of May of 1960. So I've been doing this over 50 years, even though I didn't pass the bar immediately. We had some problems with that. I worked for the state quite a period of time.
Okay. Talk to us about your early school days in Polk County.
Okay, well, I started the first grade, and in our first grade class, we had probably one of the finest classes that ever came out of Lakeland. We had, there was Lawton Childs, who became U.S. Senator and a governor. We had John Turner, who became head of the ears, nose, and throat at one of the largest universities in the South. And we had Doug Breathitt, who became an attorney. We had Fitz Toll, who became a very successful man with one of the larger insurance companies. We had Emily Kuhn, whose friend was a doctor, and I understand Emily is a doctor up north now. We had Ann Guilford was in our class. Ann was still around Lakeland. Sally Skipper, whose brother Billy was big in finance around here. Sally married a insurance adjuster over in Tampa. Sally is still around. I think she was here. So in all, in the class of 30, and I want to say Miss Andrews, but I don't think it was Miss Andrews. I think Miss Andrews our second grade. But in our first grade class, also there's Thomas Jack Newsom, and some of the others. Anyway, there was 30 of us. We had about, I believe, 10 who went to the top of their field. I think Lawton was an attorney as well as being state senator, U.S. senator, and governor. We had Doug Breathitt was an attorney. I'm an attorney. John Turner was a doctor. Emily was a doctor. So we had quite a class, went all through. And of course, when we hit the 7th grade, World War II just started, and we were one of Miss Hazel Hunter Haley. Her name is Triple H, 3 letters and a cross like that. Hazel Hunter Haley, I'll never forget it. She was a lovely lady, lovely, lovely lady. She was our homeroom teacher. And we got there, we were joined by the Housefield boys, who became well known as builders around here. Both of them are still surviving. I saw them last year at our reunion. Bill Ellsworth. Bill had gone to the Catholic school and was not in our first grade class. And we had quite a class. I remember we had a scrap drive, and at that time, a M1 rifle, 30 caliber Garand, cost a little less than $100. And we had a scrap drive in our homeroom class and went all down in the edge of the railroad in the hobo jungle down there and gathered scrap for enough scrap to buy a rifle, and we sold it and sent the money to the federal government for a M1 rifle, which was one of the things we did. We had quite a crew. And Alex Bryce was another one of our boys that was in the first grade with us and went all through it. I think Alex is, I don't know if Alex is still around or not. Frank Phillips was in our 7th grade. Frank was a well-known pharmacist here at Wilson Drugs in Bartow.
Sure, a good friend of mine.
Yeah, and we had one time, I remember, when we went to Lake Morton School, and the old school, the one that before it burned, and Lawton lived right across the street on the north. And one summer, Lawton got ran over and became bed confined with a broken leg, and I was over there and before school started, and they had a big avocado tree and a big pecan tree, and the squirrels would come from the avocado tree into the pecan tree. Now Lawton was in the front room, laid up on a hospital bed with his leg like this in a cast, and his mother got the 22 410, a little over under, and I took it and went out, and when the squirrel jumped between the avocado tree and the pecan tree, I shot the squirrel. Now, back then you didn't waste anything, and we went in and his mama got some papers, and on his hospital bed, Lawton and I dressed that squirrel that summer.
I've heard a lot of Lawton Child story, but I've never heard that one before.
Well, we had quite a time. Actually, I think it was later that summer that Lawton got 10 mallard eggs, and that's where the ducks started on Lake Morton. Now, they were put them under a hen to hatch, and if 8 hatched, I was supposed to get one. Well, 9 hatched, and I didn't live on the lake. I never did get my duck, but that whole summer, we used to take and go every day. We'd take the ducks and put them over across the street from where he lived there, and late in the afternoon, we'd get out in Lake Morton and swim and take the baby ducks and bring them home. But that's where the original bunch of mallards came from there.
Well, aside from swimming in Lake Morton, what are some of your other memories about recreation opportunities in Polk County in your childhood, Johnny?
They used to have Kissingen Springs here in Bartow. I don't know if you've ever are out there.
Yes, indeed.
And that was a big deal. Along about this time of year, the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen, my dad was a railroad man, always had a big picnic, and they had all the good food. And this time of year, the peas were coming in and all that kind of stuff, the fresh vegetables, and the fried chicken. And those ladies cooked fried chicken, a real fried chicken, out of the yard. You know, it wasn't frozen. And they also had a Georgia Crackers picnic we used to go to, and it was about the same thing. People in this part of the country, and they gathered at Kissingen Springs. Of course, we used to go down and hitchhike from Lakeland and go down, and a lot of times I have walked from Highway 17 south into where the springs were. It was down to the east side of, was it about a mile down there?
That sounds about right.
About a mile down there, and then the other side of Kissingen, there was a small swimming hole deal over there that was sort of like a spring. You remember that, or was it dry when you came along?
I've interviewed people about it. I don't remember it, but
well,
I've been told there was another spring-fed pool.
Yeah,
there.
I did something down there one time, and when I went to college, I got an A on my paper. We used to take a rubber from an inner tube, cut up an inner tube, make rubber bands, and we used to make rubber guns. And you take the rubber gun and make like a pirate's pistol and shoot one and have a rubber gun. And you would also make your machine gun, which would be, you'd have 4 or 5 and you'd have a string on the top and you'd pull it up like that and shoot the rubbers. And we went down one time and I took a piece of a welding rod, like a coat hanger, about the size of a coat hanger, and beat the end of it and made me a little spear. And took a piece of bamboo and made me, in essence, a spear gun like you use in saltwater. And we used to go to Kissingen, and the dock was about 2 or 3 times the size of this room. And we would go down under the dock and try to spear catfish with the spear gun. And I wrote, when I was in college, I wrote a Catch a Catfish with a coat hanger about that. But we had times a little different, wasn't you know, I recall one time, folks tell you about how tough and hard times are.
Mm-hmm.
You really haven't seen most of them. My older brother was 7 years older than I am, and he used to have a Tampa Tribune route. I mean a Tampa Times, I'm sorry. Tribune was morning paper, Times the afternoon paper, and he had a Tampa Times, but the Tampa Times didn't have a Sunday edition. And at that time, it was 10 cents a week. Now he had a route down in the backside of Lakeland down there, and I went down with him. Now I'm about 7, he's 13, 14 years old. I'm a little kid, and we went to this. They used to call them jukes. It was an old frame house up off the ground, and they would have a juke organ and usually an ice box, and in this ice box, they would sell soda waters. So my brother was trying to collect his dime, put a week's paper in. The guy said, well, will you take 2 cold drinks? And my brother said, yeah, we'll take 2 cold drinks for a dime. They were nickel apiece for RCs. Most of them didn't have Cokes, and most of them had RCs, and Pepsi wasn't really known at that time. And the man went in there in this old ice box with the ice, and he went to pulling up knee highs, and all of them were open. And he had a tough time trying to find 2. At that time, they would sell you 1, 2, or 3 cents worth of soda water, and then cap it back up and put it in there. And now you talk about times tough. You haven't seen times so tough till they sell you a penny or 2 cents worth of knee-high.
Talking about tough times, tell us about your memories of the Depression. I understand you had 8 avocado trees help you get through the hard times.
We had, my dad had 8 avocados. He was came down from Georgia, and in the 20s, Lakeland was full of avocado trees, and he planted avocados. He had one that looked like an eggplant, beautiful, great big dark purple pear, and they call that the ball pears from the Ball homestead there in Lakeland, and we had several of those. But we would sell avocados in the summertime for spending money. And one time my dad got on the train. He was a railroad man, World War II. A railroad man could ride anywhere on the road, but there wasn't usually wasn't standing room only on most of the trains, and he had to go to Chicago for some reason. And when he got on, it was long in about August, and he had those great big nice 2-3 pound avocados, and he got on the train with a dozen of them in a pillowcase. And when he got on there, he went to the steward. They used to always have a car with a steward and a cook on it and such. And he pulled a couple of those avocados out, and that steward talked to the captain, who was a conductor, and the old man, they put him in one of them sleeping bugs to go to Chicago. But our generation probably was hunters and gatherers. You know, we fished Lake Morton, we fished Lake Hunter, we fished Lake Wire. Did not fish Lake Mirror. Lake Mirror, we go to Lake Mirror and catch minnows in a minnow net, but fish Parker some. Parker at that time was relatively wild. They had not cut the main road from where the power plant is now around Lake Parker. It used to, those roads went down to Lake Parker instead of the road coming around it now. And in fact, I remember the Phelps lived out there.
Well, tell me about World War II. Do you remember where you were and what you were doing on
yes,
Pearl Harbor Day?
Yes, sir. Just like it was yesterday. We had some friends, the Poppels. Now, Mr. T.J. Poppel was the principal of Lakeland High School for many, many years. He was also the men's Bible class teacher at the First Baptist Church. He had a son and a daughter, Jay Jr., and I forgot his daughter's name, but the Jay Jr. was a little bit of a sissy, and the other boys didn't associate with him much. The kid was what we would call a scholar today, but he was smart and wore glasses. You know what I mean? And Pearl Harbor Day, for some reason, I went home with the Poppels for lunch that day. One time in my life, never did before, never did after. And we had lunch, and the boy and I, Jay, they lived out there right past where Highlands Hills is in Lakeland, where the turnpike comes through now. And they lived up there on the hill. And we were down by the ditch that runs through Highland Hills. And his daddy, Mr. Poppel, came down the hill and told us the Japs had attacked Pearl Harbor. And I remember it. It was the only time I was ever out there, but I still remember it.
And so many people have told me about that experience. Say the first reaction was, What's Pearl Harbor? Where's
Yeah,
Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
Was that a new name to you and your friend the Poppels?
Not really, because I was always pretty good at geography, and I knew where Hawaii was. I knew it was out there in the middle of the Pacific. I knew it belonged to us. I knew that much.
Yeah. Okay, what about the wartime rationing? What do you remember about the rationing laws?
I remember my dad was a railroad man, and Daddy always needed coffee, and we'd swap sugar for coffee to some of the kin folks and such. I remember they had shoe rationing. You only had one pair of shoes a year, and you better you get good shoes. And I was taught to wear leather shoes with leather soles, and I did all my life. I never was a soft sole athletic shoe person, and today in my old age it's tough. I see that the ones you're wearing don't have leather soles. And the one he's wearing don't have leather soles, and mine don't either. You can't hardly find them. Remember one time, my dad's brothers were in Georgia, South Georgia, and my dad went up and got a half of beef. One of the brothers up there killed a beef, and he got a half of beef and brought it down, and we lived on Orange Street, and on Main Street was I believe it was C&O Cold Storage, but 2 blocks right straight up the alley from our house was on Main Street was a cold storage, and we had a freezer box. Everybody rented a freezer locker, and we raised chickens, and we would kill the chickens, kill a dozen chickens, and put most of them in the freezer. Well, we had the beef up there in the freezer one year, but we ate good. Had one funny thing. We used to have a grocer down there on the corner of Dakota and Orange, Mr. George King. George King's senior. Old man King was from North Carolina, and he was an old man that was real particular about his meat. And now Swift and Company was 2.5 blocks up there on Lake Wire, and they had their meat warehouse up there, and old man King would walk up that two blocks and mark his piece of meat, his half. And once a week, they would deliver him a half of beef. And if it didn't have his mark on it, that old man would send it back, even during World War II. And we always had a count down there, and I have a baby sister that's 4 years younger than I am. Frankie was always sort of special. And she went down into rationing, and Mr. King, you folks and most folks today can't imagine a candy case with just 1 or 2 little things in it. You can't imagine that today, but back then there was no candy in there. And he got a little candy once in a while, and Mr. King had gotten a box of Dentyne chewing gum. And my baby sister Frankie, and Frankie, like I said, was 4 years younger than I am, so as long in the war there, she was 8 or 9, and she came in and she wanted chewing gum. Mr. King gave it to her, and she said, "I want another one." And he said, "No, only one to the customer." She said, "I'm not a customer, I'm Frankie." and she got her chewing gum. She got her chewing gum, and Frankie's still Frankie. She's still alive, and goes to First Baptist Church in Lakeland, and, along with a number of our friends. We all went to the First Baptist Church. My mother was the superintendent over the intermediate department, that's the teenagers, from 1929 to up in the 50s. And then she became superintendent of the whole Sunday school in First Baptist Church. So we were all in the church there, and everybody knew it. My mother was 5 foot tall, and my daddy was 6 foot tall, and there was 12 years difference in their age, and everybody in the church, particularly the kids, called my mother Shorty. Now, My daddy didn't like that. You didn't do that around the old man because he didn't put up with that. He that was a disrespect to his wife. But my mother was quite well known among the kids. Lovely kids.
Well, you were 11 years old on Pearl Harbor Day, but you had a number of relatives served in World War II, and then you went into service in the Korean War.
Right. There was my oldest brother, Tom, was in the 8th Air Force, and he flew in the Pulaski raids. Now, the Pulaski over there was the Pulaski oil fields, and I'm not sure which one of the European countries, Bulgaria, I believe it was. But anyway, they said the flak was so thick that it looked like you could get out and walk on it. And when he came back after World War II, he didn't talk about it all for 3 years. But he was very lucky. They lost a large percentage of their squadron in that raid, and he got back. So Tom died in '76. My dad died in '77. My brother Jack was in the Navy, but he was in the Navy flight school. In World War II, they were trying to get him a college education, and for two and a half, 3 years, they just sent him University of North Carolina, University of South Carolina, UNC, NC State, and into World War II, they offered him to stay in or get a discharge, and he got out, so he didn't go overseas. Now, in my generation, I went to Germany. I was very fortunate in the Korean War. I went in '51, in February of '51, so they were shooting real bullets. But I went to Germany. My brother-in-law, Donald Moore, who was baby sister Frankie's husband, he was in the Navy, and he was in all over. My sister Mary Alice's husband was in the Army. He was in CIC, I believe. Mary Alice passed away in December, and Charlie's a retired attorney. But out of 5 kids, 3 of us went in service, and the 2 spouses, the other went in service. So all 5 out of 5 went. I mean, we all during wartime.
Real family military tradition there.
Yeah.
So you went to a law school, graduated in 1960, and then did you immediately go into practice?
No, I took the bar, and I had some problems with the bar, and I went to work in '62 when Clint Curtis was appointed after Jess Wilson was appointed circuit judge. Clint Curtis was the youngest county solicitor we ever had, and I went to work. Funny thing that summer, I had no job. Times was tough. Snow Martin Jr. had a friend coming down from Gainesville for the summer, and the county had appropriated 60 or 90 days money for this law clerk for the state's, for the office over there. Well, I said, can I have it? I'm a local boy. They said, no, this is already done. You know, it's a done deal. Well, this boy was a Yankee boy, and he decided to go home. So everybody had egg on their face, and I worked for Clint Curtis that summer with Mary Regaway and Gordon McCalla and Clint, and I'm trying to think, Mark Tillis and the other attorney here, but and the boy out of Haines City. But I was law clerk that year, and then I worked for Metropolitan Insurance for a short period of time, and then I spent 9 years with the state in the insurance commissioner's office, and I worked with Charlie Maddox for. Did you know Charlie?
Know the name.
Charlie Maddox in 1951, when I started to go into the service. My Sunday school teacher was D.C. Laird. D.C. Laird at that time, D.C. Laird and Eddie Flood, and one other attorney, and Manuel Glover, and Oxford were the criminal bar. Okay, D.C. told me don't go in, don't mess with them criminals. You don't need to do that. But he was a Christian gentleman, but Charlie Maddox ran a little restaurant out here in 51 here in Bartow. It was a very popular restaurant, and he ran it on a little 2-burner gas stove. And Charlie had chicken and shrimp and steaks, and the courthouse crowd went to his restaurant. And of course, I went to work for Charlie in 1964, which was years later. And he used to tell me that he made more money on beer than anything. At that time, he said, never touch it. He had a cooler. The beer man brings the beer in. And if all these guys fishing this whole part of the country would come by and buy a case of beer. When you bought a case of beer, you went in and picked the beer up, and you brought it to the cash register and paid for it, went out. He said, never touched it. He said that was a lot better than the food. But he had a deal that in his restaurant you could only drink one beer, and then you had to have food. He did not run a beer joint. He ran a restaurant, but he sold a lot of beer. Nobody could figure where he sold beer, and what he had was all these guys fishing. They go and fishing, and they just run up there and run in and get the beer, and it was good and cold, so he kept it in the cooler back there.
Do you remember the name of the restaurant?
No, I was trying to remember it. I don't. It was 50. Hilton at 51, 50 or 51. But he was telling me about it. He run it for a number of years around here.
So you graduated from law school in 1960. It only took you 15 years to pass the...
Only 15, 14.
14, okay.
15, you're right. I passed the bar in 75, yeah.
How do you remember enough from law school in 1960 to pass the bar in 1975?
They used to kid me about my handwriting. It's atrocious. That was the terrible thing. The first time I took it in my handwriting, at that time, the first time I took it was 20 questions. Had 4 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, 4 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, then 4 in the morning came home. It was a 3-day exam down in Miami. And the first time we took it, I went down with some friends out of St. Peto. Boy, later became a judge over there. And they regraded one question, and we went to take it. I went to take it a second time, and the week before, they regraded one question. And this one question, I was a fraction of a point away, and it was 20 questions, essay questions. They'd give you 4 or 5 paragraphs, and they'd have every kind of law you ever thought of. They'd have con law in there and criminal law in there, and then some guy got a divorce, and there'd be a Catholic priest with a money problem, and just everything you could think of. But we been a long ride. I moved to Lake Alfred in '63. It got too big in Lakeland and too crowded, and about the same time I got rather deep in orchids, and me and my wife for years have been very active in the Ridge Orchid Society. My wife and I have been married for 56 years, I believe. April 16th of 56, I guess that's 56, isn't it?
Works out for me.
I think
56, somewhere in there, a bunch.
56 years. She's...
So then you went into practice with a couple of partners for 1 year, and then you've since 1976 up to the present you're in a sole practitioner.
Sole practitioner. My wife, my secretary, and they say how you do it 24 hours a day is tough. But I do the work, and she gets the money, and we try to pay the bills. And
I see that you were quite a fisherman for a number of years.
Yeah, I had a reputation of catching a lot of speckled perch. I fished nowhere except my backyard. I live on Lake Alfred, and up until the freeze of 2010, I would bet you a $10 bill any night that I could put you a bucket full in the boat. We fish at night, and since the freeze, it killed them or something happened. We have not caught a mess of fish but once since then. We would go out and in fact, sometimes we'd catch a few over. One night I carried Charlie Kitty over there. Charlie's a builder. And he says, can we carry my brother-in-law? I said, yeah, let's bring him, Got a little small pontoon boat with a Honda generator on it, but we got room for, actually, you can fish 4 comfortable. I said, yeah, 3's all right. So he came out there, and Charlie got one, and he was nice, about like your arm, about that thick. And I said, Charlie, that's a pound. He's a good honest pound. I said, okay. In a few minutes, I caught one. I said, mine's bigger than yours. He said, no, it ain't. I got my pocket knife out and nicked that one a little, nicked his tail and threw him in there. And we got into him, and I told him, I said, now we're making a mess for my black barbecue man. I said, y'all don't throw nothing back. If you kill him, you keep him, okay? A little 3-finger wide. We had 5 of them about that big, and the rest of them was nice ones, 13, 14 ounces. And we got in and weighed the 2 biggest ones, and they weighed 2 pounds and a quarter. So they were honest pounders. I looked, put them back on the scale. One weighed a pound, 1 pound and a quarter. Mine had the nick on it. I said, mine's bigger than yours, Charlie. So both of them took 20 nice specks apiece, and I took my black barbecue man a 5-gallon bucket full of specks.
Jonnie Hutchinson, it's been fascinating talking to you, a classmate of Lawton Childs and some other folks who went on to considerable amount of prominence, helped deliver newspapers for a while, learned that you could buy a knee-high soda 1 sip at a time instead of a whole bottle at a time. Managed to pass the bar in only 15 years after you graduated from law school. That's probably a record of some sort, although I'm not sure. Been in practicing law in Haines City since 1975.
Lake Alfred, not Haines City.
Oops, sorry. Lake Alfred. Lake Alfred, stand corrected. Been practicing law since then, 80 years old and haven't slowed down a bit. Jonnie, thank you very much. Enjoy talking to you.